You're at home when you hear a knock on the door. When you open it, you find two smiling, well-dressed people holding colorful leaflets. They talk about a world without pain, without injustice, where everyone will live in peace. It sounds like a positive message, but what if I told you that behind these words there is something that few dare to question? What really goes on inside the Jehovah's Witnesses organization? What are the rules that members follow without question? How does such a disciplined and structured group manage to keep millions of people under control? Get ready to discover details that are rarely mentioned. What you're about to hear could completely change your view of this movement. The story begins in the 19th century when a young man called Charles Taze Russell decided to reinterpret the scriptures. Dissatisfied with traditional doctrines, he believed he had found hidden secrets in the Bible and began to spread his own ideas. In 1876, he announced that Jesus had already returned, invisibly. He also predicted that the end of the world would happen in 1914. Time passed, the date arrived, and nothing happened. Did this mean the end of the movement? On the contrary, the organization reorganized itself, adjusted its doctrines, and continued to grow. After Russell's death, Joseph Rutherford took over and transformed the group into a rigid, controlling structure. It was he who implemented the famous door-to-door preaching and established strict rules for followers. Over the years, new prophecies failed, but the organization always found ways to reinvent itself and maintain control over its members. And here the big question arises: how did a movement that missed so many predictions manage to become one of the most organized religions in the world? The answer lies in the way it operates internally: bans, isolation, fear. These are the pillars of a system that keeps millions of people submissive to the Watchtower's rules. But at what cost? What happens when someone decides to leave? Have you ever been visited by a Jehovah's Witness? What did you think of their approach? Comment below. Take the opportunity to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next revelations. To understand the rise of Jehovah's Witnesses, we need to go back in time. Charles Taze Russell, the founder, was a young man who disagreed with the religious doctrines of the 19th century. Fascinated by biblical prophecies, he began to study the scriptures intensely and came to the conclusion that the second coming of Christ had already taken place, but invisibly. This would have occurred in 1874, and according to him, in 1914, the world as we know it would come to an end. Thousands of followers adhered to his belief, eagerly awaiting the great event. However, when 1914 arrived and nothing happened, the organization had to reinvent itself. They claimed that God's kingdom had been established in heaven and that Armageddon was still coming. They just didn't know when. Over time, new dates were set, such as 1925 and 1975, all of which failed resoundingly. Even so, the organization never lost its strength. After Russell's death in 1916, Joseph Rutherford took over, and that's when the group became what we know today. Rutherford not only strengthened the organization's hierarchy, but also imposed a rigid, centralized structure. It was he who made the name Jehovah's Witnesses official in 1931, differentiating the group from any other Christian denomination. He also reinforced door-to-door evangelization, making it mandatory. But most importantly, under his leadership came the rules that would turn the movement into a control machine. Bans on birthdays, political votes, blood transfusions. Rules that shape the lives of the faithful and keep them within a closed system. Over the decades, the organization has consolidated a financial empire, accumulating properties and vast resources through the contributions of its members. But are these donations really used for good? Jehovah's Witnesses present themselves as a peaceful community, united by faith. But what goes on inside this organization is much more complex than it seems. To keep its members under absolute control, The Watchtower uses a strategy that mixes social isolation, fear, and psychological manipulation. From childhood, the faithful are taught that the outside world is dangerous. They are taught that any contact with information contrary to the doctrine can corrupt their faith. This creates a mental block, preventing them from questioning the imposed rules. In addition, anyone who dares to disagree is seen as a rebel and can be expelled, which means losing contact with friends and family. The fear of being alone is one of the main control mechanisms. Another crucial point is blind obedience. Within the organization, there is no room for one's own opinions. Watchtower leaders claim to be God's only channel of communication with humanity. Questioning any teaching is considered an act of betrayal. This kind of indoctrination generates total dependence. The member doesn't trust his own thoughts, only what the organization says. And what about the prohibitions? Birthday parties, Christmas, politics, blood transfusions, everything is forbidden. The rules are presented as divine directives, but in practice they function as a form of separation from the rest of society. With each restriction imposed, the organization reinforces its control over its faithful, creating an environment where fear and guilt dictate daily decisions. The result? Millions of people live within a system that decides even the smallest details of their lives. And for those who try to leave, the price is high. Not only do they lose their community, but they also face deep psychological trauma. After all, when your identity is tied to a group, leaving it means losing everything you know. But there is something even darker behind the Watchtower: the accusations of abuse and the way the organization silences victims to protect its image. This is one of the most hidden and disturbing aspects of this story. Leaving Jehovah's Witnesses is not just a change of belief, but a radical break with everything the individual knows. Those who decide to leave the organization face contempt from their own family members, total isolation, and a sense of loss of identity that can be devastating. Childhood friends, parents, siblings, everyone cuts ties without hesitation. This process, known as disassociation, acts as a severe psychological punishment designed to discourage anyone thinking of leaving. But there is something even more alarming: the cases of abuse that Watchtower tries to hide. Reports from victims show a pattern of silence imposed by the organization's leadership. Abuses are dealt with internally, away from the authorities, protecting the perpetrators and leaving the victims without justice. This cover-up isn't an isolated mistake. It's a well-structured system aimed at preserving the organization's reputation above all else. And so the question arises: how can a group that claims to be guided by God act in this way? The truth is that the Watchtower is not just a religion, but an empire that uses faith as a tool of control. With strict rules, a system of donations disguised as devotion, and an indoctrination based on fear, the organization keeps its followers trapped in a cycle of obedience and submission. But all is not lost. Every year, more and more ex-members have the courage to expose the contradictions and abuses of this organization. People who have spent years inside this system are finally seeing the truth and finding a new life away from the Watchtower's control. If this video has made you think, leave your opinion in the comments. Do you know anyone who has been through this? Do you think these practices should be exposed more? Your interaction helps spread this message. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. The truth always finds a way to be revealed.